The maître d' looked at my hands before he looked at my face. I noticed the way his eyes dropped just for a second to the calluses on my knuckles, the permanent stain of grease that 40 years of electrical work had pressed into the lines of my palms. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that isn't a smile at all, and said, "I'm sorry, sir. This event is by invitation only." I told him my grandson was being honored inside that room. He checked his tablet, scrolled again. "I don't see your name on the confirmed guest list. Perhaps you have the wrong evening?" I did not have the wrong evening. I had driven 41 minutes from the house I built myself, the one with the wraparound porch I finished the summer my son turned 12. Wearing the blue blazer, my wife helped me pick out 2 Christmases before she passed. I had the right evening. I had been to every single event in my grandson's life, every Little League game, every school play, every science fair where he'd made me stand in front of his project for 20 minutes while he explained how volcanoes worked like I didn't already know. I had never missed one. Not once. I told the maître d' to tell my son I was at the door. He made a quiet call, waited. Then he put the phone down and said, "Sir, I've been asked to let you know that seating is full at the family table. There may have been a miscommunication. A miscommunication. 41 years of raising a son, and it came down to a miscommunication." I stood there in the lobby of the Hargrove House Hotel, while well-dressed couples moved past me toward the ballroom. And I thought about Tyler, 14 years old, the best student at Westfield Academy, the kid who called me every Sunday evening just to talk, who still had the birdhouse we built together hanging in his bedroom window. Tonight was the Westfield Academic Excellence Dinner. Tyler was receiving the Foundation Scholarship, the biggest award the school gave, $25,000 toward college. And my son did not want me at the table. I want to tell you something about my son, Daniel. I want you to understand who he is and how he got there, because it matters. It matters for what happened next. Daniel grew up in that house on Crescent Mill Road. He wore secondhand cleats to soccer practice because new ones cost money I didn't have, but he wore them without complaint because he understood, back then, that we worked with what we had. I taught him to change a breaker box at 14. I taught him to pour a concrete footing, to read a blueprint, to measure twice and cut once. He was sharp, always sharp. He got a partial scholarship to state, and I covered the rest every semester, working double shifts through 2 winters that nearly broke my back. When he graduated with his architecture degree, I stood in that gymnasium and I cried. I am not ashamed of that. I cried because I had done it. We had done it. Then he married Melissa. I have nothing against Melissa personally. She is organized, ambitious, and she loves my grandson. I believe that. But Melissa came from a family where appearances were the primary currency, and somewhere in the years after their wedding, Daniel started spending in that currency too. The invitations to Sunday dinner became less frequent. The calls got shorter. My grandson still came to stay with me summers that was non-negotiable for Tyler, who would pack his bag himself if he had to, but Daniel and Melissa came less and less. And when they did come, I noticed the way Melissa would look at the house. Not at the craftsmanship, not at the hand-laid stone path I'd built along the garden, but at what wasn't there. The granite countertops that weren't there. The new car in the driveway that wasn't there. Last Thanksgiving, Daniel mentioned, very casually, that they'd joined Hargrove Country Club, that some of his firm's most important clients were members, that it was a good investment in the business. I told him that sounded fine. He didn't ask me to join them there for dinner. I didn't ask to be asked. But Tyler called me that same night and said, "Grandpa, I wish you were here. Mom made me wear a tie." I told him a tie never hurt anybody. So now I was standing in the lobby of the Hargrove House Hotel, which sits on the same grounds as the country club, and my son had told the maître d' to tell me there was no room at the table, and I had a decision to make. I could leave. I could drive 41 minutes back to my house and sit in the kitchen and feel the particular quiet of a man who has been told, without words, that he is an embarrassment. I knew that quiet. I'd been learning its shape for 3 years. Or I could make a phone call. I am 67 years old. I have spent my entire working life solving problems that other people couldn't see the solution to. When a building's electrical system goes down, and 3 contractors have already looked at it and gone home, They call the man who has been doing this since before those contractors were born. I have a way of finding the wire everyone else missed. It has served me well. I found a chair in the lobby, sat down, and I made a call. The phone rang twice. A woman answered and said, "Westfield Academy Foundation. This is Carol." I told her my name. She recognized it immediately. "Mr. Callahan," she said, and her voice warmed by about 10 degrees. "Of course. Are you here for the dinner? We've been looking forward to seeing you." I told her I was in the lobby and that there seemed to be a seating issue. There was a pause. Then, "Please don't move. I'll be right down. I should explain something here. Because Daniel didn't know this part. Almost nobody knew this part. And that was intentional. 4 years ago, Westfield Academy was in trouble. The foundation that funded their scholarship program, the one Tyler was receiving tonight, had lost a significant chunk of its endowment in a bad investment. The school's board was considering eliminating the program entirely. They made a quiet appeal to alumni and community supporters. The kind of appeal you don't put in the newspaper because you don't want to broadcast that you're struggling. I heard about it through Bill Harmon, who does my taxes and sits on the school's finance committee. He mentioned it almost offhand. The way you mention something you assume the other person can't do anything about. At the time, I had just sold a piece of land my father left me 12 acres outside of town that I'd held for 30 years and never built on. The sale came through for a number that surprised even my attorney. I gave $450,000 to the Westfield Academy Foundation. Not in my name. I told Bill I didn't want a building named after me or a plaque on a wall. I just wanted the scholarship program to survive. He respected that. The donation was recorded as coming from the Callahan Family Trust, which meant almost nothing to anyone who didn't go looking. Daniel had no idea. He knew I'd sold the land. He did not know what I'd done with the money, because by that point our conversations had grown short enough that the subject never came up. Tyler was 8 years old when I made that donation. He didn't know about it either. He was accepted to Westfield on merit alone, which is exactly what I wanted. He earned his place there. He earned the scholarship he was receiving tonight. I had only made sure the scholarship still existed for him to earn. Carol came down the stairs in a navy blazer, moving quickly. She was the foundation's executive director. A sharp woman in her early 50s who had shaken my hand warmly at the gala last spring where I'd attended as a quiet donor. She extended her hand again now and said, "Mr. Callahan, I am so sorry. There was absolutely no flag on your name. You should have received a priority invitation. This is our error entirely." I told her there was no need to apologize. "You are our guest of honor tonight," she said. "Tyler is receiving the scholarship that your donation made possible. We had planned a small acknowledgement during the ceremony. I assumed you knew." I told her I didn't know about the acknowledgement. She looked briefly uncertain. "Your attorney coordinated with us, I assumed." She stopped. "Well, it doesn't matter. You're here, and that's what matters. Please come with me." We walked into the ballroom together. It was a beautiful room. High ceilings, round tables with white linens, 200 people in formal dress. At the front of the room, there was a stage with a podium and a banner that read, "Westfield Academy Foundation Annual Excellence Dinner." I saw the faculty table, the board table, the parents clustered at the round tables nearest the stage. And I saw Daniel. He was sitting at a table near the front with Melissa beside him, and 2 couples I didn't recognize, well-dressed, probably clients, probably the entire reason he hadn't wanted me at that table with my blue blazer and my contractor's hands. He was leaning forward saying something that made one of the men laugh, easy and comfortable, performing the version of himself that Melissa had helped him build over the past several years. He saw me walk in with Carol. The expression on his face moved through several stages, quickly surprise, confusion, something close to alarm before settling into a careful stillness. Tyler saw me too, from a kid's table near the side of the room where the honorees were seated, and his reaction was nothing like his father's. He stood up so fast his chair scraped back, and he crossed the room in about 4 seconds and grabbed me around the middle, the way he'd been doing since he was small, despite being 5'10" now and nearly eye level with me. "Grandpa, I thought you weren't coming. Dad said you couldn't make it." I held on to him for a moment. "I made it," I said. "I wanted you here so bad." He pulled back and looked at me seriously the way he does sometimes, an old expression on a young face. "You're the reason I work hard, you know that? You always say measure twice, cut once. I think about that on every test." I told him I was proud of him. I meant it in every cell of my body. Carol guided me to a seat that had been arranged at the foundation board table, right at the front, while Tyler went back to sit with the other honorees. I was 2 tables away from Daniel. I did not look at him. I did not need to. The dinner proceeded. The salad course, the main course, the quiet music, and the low hum of a room full of people performing their best social selves. I ate and I spoke with the board members around me. People who knew the work the foundation did and were grateful for it. Bill Harmon was there and he clasped my hand and said, "Really glad you're here tonight, Robert." He said it with weight. Then the program began. The head of the board spoke about the Academy's history, the values of excellence and community, the way scholarship changed lives. He introduced the student honorees one by one. Each one came to the stage, shook hands, received an envelope, said a few words. There was applause. There were parents crying in the audience. When Tyler's name was called, the applause was noticeably louder. He had won the top award, the full foundation scholarship. And even the people who didn't know him seemed to feel the weight of it. He walked to the stage with the particular dignity of a teenager trying not to look too emotional, and he gave a short speech about his grandfather, teaching him that the most important tools weren't in any toolbox but in how you thought about problems. And there was more applause, and I pressed my thumb into the inside of my wrist so I would not cry in a room full of Daniel's clients. Then the board chair said, "Before Tyler receives his scholarship tonight, I want to say a few words about how this foundation has been able to grow. 4 years ago, we faced a serious challenge. Our endowment had taken a significant loss, and our scholarship program, the program that supports students like Tyler tonight, was in genuine jeopardy. At that time, a member of our community came forward with a transformational gift, $450,000, given quietly, without condition, and without any request for recognition. The room had gone still, in the way that rooms go still when something important is being said. That donor asked to remain anonymous. He has been anonymous for 4 years, but tonight, with his permission which we sought, and which he graciously gave, we would like to acknowledge the man whose generosity made tonight possible, and made Tyler's scholarship possible, and will make possible the scholarships of hundreds of students who come after him." He paused. "Robert Callahan, would you please stand?" I stood up. The applause started slowly, the way it does when a room needs a moment to connect the name to the face to the story. Then it built. I looked at the tables around me and saw faces I didn't know, and Carol standing with her hands clasped together, and Bill Harmon clapping with his eyes red. And I saw Daniel. He had gone very still. Melissa's hand was on his arm. The 2 couples at the table, the clients, the people he'd curated this evening around, were looking from the stage to Daniel and back, recalibrating, recalculating. One of the men leaned over and said something to Daniel. Daniel nodded slowly. His jaw was tight. Tyler was at the podium with his hands flat on the sides of it, and he was staring at me, and his face had completely fallen open. He hadn't known either, and I watched him understand in real time what the board chair had just said. He pressed his lips together. He shook his head slowly. "Grandpa," he said into the microphone, and it wasn't part of any prepared speech. Just one word. The room let him have it. I sat back down. I put my hands on the table in front of me, these old hands that have wired buildings and poured concrete and shingled roofs and held my son when he was small and steady enough to hold, and I let the applause settle over me, and I thought about nothing in particular. Sometimes that is the correct response to a moment. You simply let it be what it is. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the adjoining hall. People I'd never met came to shake my hand. Tyler stayed close to my side for most of it, occasionally inserting himself between me and whoever was trying to talk to me, which was so like him that I had to keep looking away to hold myself together. Daniel found me by the windows. He came alone. Melissa stayed by the drinks table with a fixed smile, and the client couples had drifted elsewhere into the party, and it was just Daniel, standing in front of me in his expensive suit, looking like a man who had miscalculated something important and knows it. He started with, "Dad, I need to explain." I told him he didn't need to explain anything. The seating was Melissa's. I said his name once, quietly, the way I used to, when he was young and had done something he already knew was wrong and was starting to make excuses for it. He stopped. We stood there for a moment. "I didn't know about the donation," he said. Not an excuse, just a fact he was processing out loud. I told him that was correct. He didn't know about it because I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him because I hadn't done it for him or for anyone to know about. I'd done it because Tyler deserved a fair chance, and because some things matter more than credit. He looked out the window at the dark grounds of the hotel. I could see something working behind his face, something he hadn't let himself feel in a while. "I've been ashamed of you," he said. He said it quietly. He said it like a man confessing something he's already disgusted with himself for. "Not of you, of the way things look, the way I thought you made things look." He stopped. That's a terrible thing for a son to say. I told him it was honest, at least. That I'd rather have the honest thing than the polished thing. I thought if my client saw you, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I knew what he'd thought. He'd thought they'd see the calluses and the blue blazer and the second-hand quality of me, and they'd subtract it from the column where he kept his credibility. I told him what those clients had seen tonight. I told him one of them had shaken my hand at the reception and said, "Your father built something real." That man had meant the foundation gift. But I had thought about the wraparound porch and the stone path and the birdhouse and the 40 years of double shifts and the checks written out every semester. And I had thought, yes, he did. Daniel had nothing to say for a while. The party went on around us, glass clinking, conversation, Tyler's laugh rising above everything else from somewhere across the room. "I'm sorry, Dad." I looked at my son. 51 years since the night he was born. The same night a January ice storm took out the power in half the county. And I sat in the waiting room by flashlight and thought, whatever this person needs, I will find a way to provide it. 51 years. He looked, standing here, very much like the 12-year-old who handed me tools when I worked and watched every move I made and asked questions the whole time. That kid was still in there. I had never stopped knowing that. I told him we were all right. He nodded. He pressed his mouth together. He looked very much like his son had looked at the podium. And I understood that certain expressions travel through generations, like wiring through the same house. We didn't say a great deal more that night. Some repairs don't happen in one conversation. They happen the way real structural repairs happen slowly, in layers, testing the joint before you put full weight on it. But before the evening ended, Daniel sat down next to me at one of the tables, and we watched Tyler move around the room like someone who had just figured out who he was, and for 40 minutes, we didn't need to say anything at all. On the drive home, I had the windows down a little despite the cold, because I've always thought better with the air moving. The highway was quiet. Ahead of me, the headlights pulled the road out of the dark one stretch at a time, and I thought about the house waiting at the end of the drive, the kitchen light I'd left on, the porch I could see from a half-mile away because I'd built it to be seen. Wide and solid. The kind of thing meant to last. I thought about what Tyler had said at the podium about the toolbox. I had told him that probably 100 times over the years in different versions, and I'd never been sure any of it was landing the way I meant it. Turns out you never know which words go deep until the person stands up in front of a room and hands them back to you. There's something I've learned about being the kind of man I am, the kind who works with his hands and saves quietly and shows up without announcing himself. The world will periodically try to tell you that you are less than what you are. It will do this through Maître D's and seating charts, and the particular way certain people's eyes move when they look at you. The world will do this, and you have to decide whether to believe it. I decided a long time ago not to believe it. Not because I'm stubborn, though my son would tell you I am, but because I have stood in the finished rooms of things I built and felt the specific satisfaction of a man who knows what he made, and that feeling has no interest in the opinions of people who have never made anything. That feeling is a load-bearing wall. Everything else leans on it. My phone buzzed on the seat when I pulled into the driveway. A text from Tyler. "Grandpa, I've been thinking about it the whole drive home. You gave away the money from great-grandpa's land. You gave it away for kids you didn't even know yet. For me, and I didn't even know. I sat in the truck for a moment in the dark. I want to be like that, he wrote. I want to be exactly like that. I thought about sending back something wise or measured, the kind of thing a man is supposed to say when his grandson hands him the best compliment of his life. I thought about it for a few seconds. Then I typed back, "You already are, kid. You already are." I went inside. I put the kettle on. Outside the window, the garden was dark and still, and the birdhouse Tyler and I built 9 years ago hung in the old oak at the edge of the yard, just visible in the porch light. 15 nails. One afternoon, a 9-year-old who couldn't quite drive a nail straight yet but kept at it until everyone was in. We measure twice. We cut once. We show up. That is the whole of it, really. That is every lesson I have ever tried to pass on, packed down to its load-bearing minimum. You show up, even when the door is closed, even when your name isn't on the list. Especially then. You show up because that is what it means to have built something that lasts.